I think the most important thing you can learn is connections. I can only imagine what my mom was thinking when the first death threat came. I hated authority for authority's sake, is what I call it. Affect my life. I didn't want an overarching government or authority figure telling me what to do. I didn't want to be governed by the CDC making up their mind on a random Tuesday and making law, because that's reserved to.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Impetus Minds of the Driven. Today, I have one of, if not the fastest growing conservative talk show host in all of the South, if not the entire country. Please welcome to Impetus Minds of the Driven, Noah Ring.
Glad to be here.
Man, one of the cool things that I cannot wait to talk with you about is how you've grown. You're 20 years old right now, and you have connections with people that I've only heard of in like fairy tales, like political fairy tales, which is kind of crazy. And I'm really excited to talk about where your career is going with this. I know that we have some really fun things that we want to share with the audience at the end of this episode. So we
can't tell them too early. It's all about audience retention.
Of course. So if you want to know some of the things that Noah and I have talked about off camera, you are going to have to stick around to the very end of this episode, and that content, though it will be available for free for everyone, it will bleed directly into the bonus material that we talk about over at locals.com. So if you want access to all of the content for this episode, including the bonus material that we have where we're going to talk about some very special things going on with Noah and his show, make sure you go over to www.forerunnerproductions.locals.com and become a supporter today. Also, this episode is brought to you by Pale Horse Coffee. Stay caffeinated, stay angry, look unapproachable. If you want 10% off of your order at www.palehorsecoffee.com, make sure you use promo code Forerunner at checkout. It'll get you 10% off your order. Again, that is palehorsecoffee.com for 10% off of your order. Noah.
Chad.
Why are you going to throw it back at you like that? We have to talk about how you got started in politics. Well, you've mentioned to me a brief story off camera. I want you to go the full deep dive. How does somebody in their early 20s, right, 20 years old, decide that they want to have a career in politics?
So it starts obviously years ago. As a kid, I remember being a kid, second, third grade maybe, and it was math class, and I remember this is like right after the whole Common Core push by President Bush, and I remember my teachers were always like, oh, we got to count off if you don't show your work, because I could always do 2 times 2 in my head, and I guess some kids couldn't, and so I remember thinking like, why do I have to show my work? Well, I remember one time, it was a few years later, it was probably 4th or 5th grade at this point, I did a test, and it came back with an 80, and there was nothing marked wrong. It was just minus 20 points. And so I remembered asking my teacher, like, hey, like, why did I get an 80, not 100? I got all the questions right. And she goes, well, you didn't show your work on the questions, so I wasn't able to give you full credit. And I said, why? And she was like, well, in case you were cheating. And I remember going, we were in the same room. And at the time, obviously, I wasn't on my phone because 4th grade was 8-9 years old. You don't even have, they have phones now, but back in the day, it was the Boost mobile phones that you could it was like a walkie-talkie. You weren't doing math on those. And I remember thinking at the time, like, I hated authority for authority's sake is what I call it. It's when, there's certain things that the government or your parents or schools tell you that matter. Don't stick a fork in a socket. It's probably a good idea. But then there's certain things that just don't matter. You start to run into ideas that people like power. It's like, look what's going on in the House right now. Nancy Pelosi put forth a mask mandate, and even though I think every single House member is vaccinated at this point, and there's not one in the Senate. And there's a line right in the middle, I guess, that you can catch COVID on the House side, but not the Senate side. So I hate authority for authority's sake. And then eventually that led into starting to understand why and starting to understand politics. And there's a great quote, I think it's by Socrates or Plato, where he said, if you're not in politics, you're governed by you're worse. Basically, people who are not as smart as you. So that's really what led into politics. Me just being anti-authority, wanting an answer really for the reasons why things are the way they are. I remember the first political issue I really had was seatbelts. I remember as a kid, I was like, why do I have to wear a seatbelt? You know, most of the Western laws are based on externalities. You know, I can't stab you because it hurts you.
Right.
I can stab myself. You know, there's no law against that because there's no externality. So I remember thinking as a kid about seatbelts. Like, if I don't wear a seatbelt, I'm the only one who gets hurt. And obviously wear seatbelts. It's probably safe, but it's still at the same time, the government shouldn't be able to force it.
Right. Now, you also told me a story about how at a very young age you were campaigning in like the 2nd grade for John McCain.
Yeah. I remember I was a kid, and somebody had told me, or I heard somehow that Barack Obama, it's probably on the school bus, I heard that Barack Obama wanted to go to school on Saturdays. And let me tell you that I guess an 8-year-old Noah Ring was a one-issue voter, and I did not want to go to school on Saturdays. 5 days was enough. I was there 40 whatever hours a week, and 5 days was enough. I didn't want to do it. And so, most schools have mock elections, which I thought at the time counted. Why wouldn't it count? I mean,
right.
And modern day, I mean, I wouldn't have to show an ID, so maybe an 8-year-old could vote. So I remember campaigning. Me and my friend made these little flyers, and it was like, John McCain, Barack Obama, and then all it said was wants school on Saturdays, doesn't want school on Saturdays. And that was enough. And guess what? John McCain got every single vote besides one. Okay, so I guess there was some nerd who wanted to go to school on Saturdays. But that was my first. There was some nerd who wanted to go to school on Saturdays, but that was my first experience with campaigns. Obviously, it's got a little bit more complex since then, tax rates and stuff like that. I wish it was as simple as he wants to go to school on Saturdays, he doesn't. So that'd be a lot easier campaign to win.
Yeah, no kidding. So why politics in general? Beyond just the idea of you have this thing with authority, as you began to realize sort of the cesspool that politics is or can be, why did you decide that you wanted to stick with it?
Because the time I've spent in politics, I've learned that most people in politics aren't smart. And most people think they're smarter than they are. And so they think they're better than you, and they think that they should be able to govern you. And I've always kind of believed in people being able to make their own choices. So
self-agency.
Exactly. And the irony is I got into politics because I didn't want politics to affect my life. Because if I don't do it, there's going to be somebody who will, and I have no idea what they're you don't spend every second of every day with a person. So I never knew their convictions, and I know my convictions. So I knew that, if I could affect anything, I really wanted to get in so I could affect for good, to make sure that the government is respecting my rights as much as they respect yours and everyone's rights. I live by a moral philosophy is do whatever floats your boat so long as it doesn't sink mine. So that's really why I got into it, because I didn't want politics to affect my life. I didn't want an overarching government or authority figure telling me what to do. I didn't want to be governed by the CDC making up their mind on a random Tuesday and making law, because that's reserved to the enumerated powers in the Constitution to the Congress.
It's one of the greatest memes that's come out of this whole COVID thing is like, after the past year and a half, there are still people that have come out of this whole COVID thing and decided that they still want the government to be able to decide things for them in their life.
Yeah.
And I wonder how people logic to that thing. And maybe that's something we can talk about a little bit later. But I want to know about your family. I want to know how, did your family give you any pushback? Did they encourage you at all to go further into the politics realm? I'm sure that no mother really wants their son to get mixed up into having, warrants put out on their
right.
their kid because the opposing party doesn't like what they have to say. And yet we see all the time with big political figures that's what eventually, if you get big enough, that's what happens. The death threats start rolling in. Why? Because you say something.
Yeah. Obviously I think most mothers want, their kids to be safe. I would at least hope.
Pretty safe assessment there,
I think it's a good, I don't think that's a controversial. That's not my most controversial opinion. I'll put it like that. So I think most people, stepping back even more, I think most people just want to live a good life and a safe life. There's definitely been pushback, and my mom and I have disagreed on things, politically in the past. Most things we agree on. But yeah, there was definitely some pushback at times. When now I have it as like kind of like a badge of honor that I have death threats. But there's definitely, I can only imagine what my mom was thinking when the first death threat came in. I think I was a junior in high school at that point, because I put something out about people. I think people should be able to own firearms or something like that. I don't even hold any really very crazy beliefs. I just believe in limited government, and people should be able to have the rights that were granted to us by our forefathers.
Mm-hmm.
And so, my mom, but now obviously that, she's understood that there's no talking me out of it now, and I'm kind of too far to turn around. She's definitely very supportive. The whole family is. They think it's cool, actually. And one of the good things that have really came out of it that never would have happened if I didn't get into politics, actually, is with my grandfather. So my family came over to Georgia originally in the late 1600s, early 1700s, in land granted to or deeded to us by the king. And since then, my family has been full of pastors and veteran and military, and different stuff like that. Very service-based family. And my one grandfather, he's a Vietnam veteran. Mm-hmm. He actually didn't want to join. It wasn't a draft, but it was like a court thing, right? He was a reckless teenager, and he was, they were like, basically go to jail, go to court. So he went to court, go to jail or go to, the military. So he joined the Navy, and while he was in the Navy, he suffered a spinal cord injury that at the time didn't give him any problems, and then a couple of years ago he fell, and when he fell, it like nicked the injury, and luckily it was documented. But now he's didn't lose his legs. He didn't lose complete use of them, but they're obviously not what they were before. Mm-hmm. And wheelchairs, walkers, whatever. So they moved a couple of years back up to Delaware, and they've been having problems with the VA. Ever since he got back from Vietnam, they've been having problems with the VA. But I remember I was driving actually from Athens to my hometown, and I was talking to my grandmother. I was like, oh, what are you up to? When I'm in the car, I like to make phone calls because it passes time. You get tired of listening to music unless it's short straight. So I was on the way back, and she's like, I've been on the phone with the VA all day. And at this point, it's 2 p.m. She'd been on the phone with him since 9 a.m. And so I said, well, hold on, grandmother, give me a second. And I made a phone call to my congressman, and I said, hey, congressman, I know that, or I called his office, I should say. And I was like, I know that they're not your constituents, but do you think you could, maybe help? And what had happened, they'd been waiting on paperwork for a while, something with, I don't know exactly what the paperwork was for. They've been waiting on paperwork for a while, a couple of months at this point. And, I made that phone call, and then I don't know what he did. He must have called somebody. I think he's on one of the committees that oversees the VA, mm-hmm. and he called somebody. And this was on January 20th, Inauguration Day. So I think that was a Tuesday or Wednesday. And I didn't expect to hear back. It's Inauguration Day. Most congressmen are out there, most senators. And let's just go with I think it was a Tuesday. And then by Friday, the VA had sent somebody to my grandmother's house with the papers in hand. They weren't fooling with the mail anymore. In hand with the papers. And it ended up getting filed. And then, my grandfather got whatever it was he got that obviously all veterans earned. Mm-hmm. And that to me is, if I get nothing else out of me, the connections I've made, I think that will always show that it's possible to get stuff done if you use the proper channels, and if you use Congress and your congressmen and your senators to good. Because I have a good friend named Rich McCormick who's running in GA 7th District to be that congressman. And one thing he said on my podcast, I let Freedom Ring a couple of weeks ago at this point, is my co-host at the time asked, well, what's your goal is to put America first? And he goes, as a congressman, especially as a freshman congressman, you really don't have any power. But constituent services are something that I can do to make my constituents' lives better. Mm-hmm. And so that was his goal with it. So after that story, nobody in my family questioned why I was in politics anymore, because it worked out and it definitely helped. So that's probably after that, now all my family's like, yeah, keep doing this. you'll start to get more and more connections higher up. You might even know the president one day.
Now, who was your first big connection that you landed of your own accord? Not because of a family connection per se. I know that's hard to differentiate because how these people are brought into our lives is kind of interesting. But as you're going through this process, you're getting more and more involved in politics, especially through your teenage years. At what point did you land your first big, like, I know somebody now?
Right. Well, I'll tell you two things. So I'll tell you the first time that I thought, I was like, oh, I'm cool. So I I'd been involved in politics since 2015. I supported Donald Trump, obviously a 14-year-old kid at this time. I have no power. I'm not making phone calls and getting him a lot of votes. And so that led, I'd been conservative on Twitter. I'd just pretty much been retweeting these people. People like Ben Shapiro, Charlie Kirk, I had been retweeting them. And I remember it was after the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shooting. That's when I really started to, it was actually because of the coach. You remember the coach who held the door open, I believe it was, and he saved countless lives, and he ended up dying. I can't think of his name, but he, I think that's the story of America. Mm-hmm. People like that, selflessly, he could have ran out and saved his life, and nobody would have called him a coward at all.
Right.
Because most people, 99% of people, but I think America is great because of that 1% of people, or probably even less than 1% of people who serve in the military and serve and will sacrifice for others. And after that, I started tweeting, in support of, or really anti-David Hogg, in support of guns and stuff like that. And this guy, his name was MAGA Gary 67. He had like 60,000 followers, right? Which at the time, I thought I had like 400 followers. I was like, that's crazy. Mm-hmm. And he DM'd me and he said, hey, Noah, I have this group chat, this, that, the other. We want to help, promote your message. Because this is before Kyle Kashuv had really came onto the scene. Because he didn't come onto the scene, if you remember, for a couple of weeks. So David Hogg, Emma Gonzalez, Delaney Tarr, who actually goes to UGA. I've ran into her a few times. Really great. All the March for Our Lives kids were they were on CNN, MSNBC, all these places attacking the NRA, attacking, law-abiding gun owners. And I remember, he really kick-started, I would say, my political career. Like, I'd always been interested in politics, but I just wanted to be a lawyer, which, again, also affects politics in a way. And then, because of that and because of, the work I put in and a lot of people who supported me really early on, I remember, actually, I would say the first time that I got a connection or a follow or something that really was, like, crazy to me was when one of the Robertsons followed me, Al Robertson. He followed me, and I remember I was getting out the shower, and I saw it said, Beardless Bro has followed you. And I was like, who's this? You can't tell who that was. And I remember it was Al Robertson. I was like, oh my God, I dropped my phone. I thought it was so cool. And that's just, one of the, because, I'd grown up watching I'm from South Georgia. I love Duck Dynasty. It's the best show ever. And so I followed him back, and then, call it shooting your shot or whatever. I'm followed by, like, some senators and some congressmen or whatever. You shoot them a DM, they don't reply because it's, their Twitters are handled by some 22-year-old Georgetown political science intern.
Been there, done that. Exactly.
So they don't reply, and if they do, it's just a basic, oh, thank you for your support. And it's like, I want to talk to you. I don't want to. But anyway, so he replied and very graciously created a friendship that's cultivated over the years. And then I would have to say my favorite thing that somebody knew me was at an event, and there was a congressman there who was fairly well known, and it was Congressman Doug Collins, actually. And I go, oh, Congressman Collins, I'm Noah Ring. I suffer sometimes from imposter syndrome, where I'm like, why do, raised in South Georgia, why is it that, I'm here, right? I think at any time.
Why does anyone else care that I'm
exactly
here?
Like, why am I at this table having this discussion? I think at any time the curtain could shut, and I would be grateful for the time and all I've learned. But Congressman Collins was like, oh yeah, I know who you are. And I was like, oh, this congressman who, as you know, defended Trump in the impeachment hearings in the Senate. It was like crazy to me that he knew who I was and that he had heard of me. So I would say that's probably the first time that I was like, whoa, like this is one of the people who, one of the 500 or so members of Congress who vote on laws, and this guy has met the president and everything like that. And then obviously, Sonny Perdue is a great person who I know, who's a great friend of mine. Mm-hmm. But no, so I don't know when it first happened. I didn't remember. The first one I remember was Al Robertson, and then Congressman Collins later on after that.
Awesome, man. And the next question I want to ask you is about your drive. But first, I want to talk to all of you at home. I have released my first book, You're Not Special, You're Gifted. And for those who can't see, it is right here. This is my book. It deals directly with this idea of finding your mission. What are you passionate about? What are your desires? Pushing back against this idea of the participation trophy culture and getting into the nitty-gritty of you're not special, but you have a gift that specifically equips you to solve a problem in this world. How to fight the depression and how to fight the coward that is in all of the back of our heads, telling us that we can't go and do something, that we can't be who we were meant to be when we were put on this earth. I highly recommend that if you are trying to find a vector, a direction for your life, if you need a little bit of a motivational push in your life to go out and use your gifts to give unto others that others may give, this book is what you need. It has amazing lessons in it. It is something that has been brewing in my mind since I was born. I go all the way through my life and all my life experiences as to how I've been able to build Forerunner Productions, my time in the military, as well as life before that, and my first failed business, and how I dealt with the failure, how I went through the journey of discovering my gifts. It's a short read because I don't think that motivational self-help books should be very long. It should be something that gives you what you need to be successful, and then if you need to, you can come back to it and read it again. So go get my book, You're Not Special, You're Gifted. It's available everywhere, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and some of your local retailers. Be sure to check it out. If your local retailer isn't carrying it, go and request it because that helps us get it on their shelves. Again, the book is called You're Not Special, You're Gifted. So speaking about drive, who do you attribute the drive that you have had in your life? Who do you sort of place the burden of proof on, more or less, whenever it's like, I am the way I am today. I have gone and striven and strived to be what I am, to grow the way that I've grown, because of this person's influence or because of this event's influence.
Right. Well, first and foremost, God, obviously. God said very early on, he who does not work does not eat. And that's, if you don't work and you're not willing to put in the work, you're not gonna succeed. You're not gonna eat. And obviously that's a very harsh example, but I think really the person that I would have to do it would be my mom. I mean, my mom is the hardest worker I know. So, since I was a kid, she's always worked hard. She's had her own businesses. She's worked for people and everything like that. She's, honestly, I don't know how she does it sometimes. Sometimes when I want to complain, I think about how hard she works and everything she sacrificed to put me and my sister in a position to, go above and beyond your parents. Because that's the goal of every parent, is for their kids to have a better life than they had, right? And that's,
should be. It
should be, right? And getting back to, I don't think that's a very controversial opinion. And because she's started businesses in the past. Not all have succeeded. Some are doing okay.
Any entrepreneur that looks at you and tells you that every business venture they've ever tried has succeeded is lying to you straight to your face.
Yeah, or they're the most lucky person in the world. Because I've started probably hundreds of businesses since I was 13 years old, and only a few of them are still around to the point where they can even be considered a business. From yard sales to I used to walk people's dogs. I tried to write a book when I was like 10 years old. I don't think I ever finished it. But no, she's really who I would have to, whenever I would say on the hard days, or what I would consider a hard day, I think about all the things she's had to do. And I realize, okay, well, it's not as bad. She grew up in, South Georgia, raised by somebody who, survived the Great Depression. So obviously my grandfather instilled hard work ethics into her, and she passed that on to me.
So if I know that with my family, there are certain like catchphrases or specific lessons that my parents have imparted on me. Are there any things that really stick out to you that you would be willing to share with everybody? Something that, just rolls through your mind that your parent, specifically your mom, that she always told you, that she always, and it doesn't have to be verbatim, but something that someone else might get a good piece off of.
Well, my mom's not really much for quotes. She'll say something the same way 100 times, or the same thing a different way 100 times. But she's always, pretty much said, like, well, obviously because I'm young, like, who matters if you fail? What matters if your lemonade stand doesn't become the next Milo's lemonade, right? Because you're so young. And that's something I think a lot of people forget, is they get caught in what I call the machine. You got to go to high school, you got to do great in high school, you got to go to college, you got to go to law school. It's not true at all. I mean, coming out of high school, I was a good student. I wasn't the best student. I wasn't valedictorian, but I was an honors graduate. And I had a chance to speak to, somebody who graduated in the top 10 of my class, I think, who is, I think, at an Ivy League school right now. We were talking and everything, and he goes, Noah, he said, sorry. He goes, Noah, if you had put in the amount of work I had, you probably would have been valedictorian. I was like, you're probably right. He was like, but you focused more on the social things. Because what they don't tell you is the kids who only focus on academics become the kids who only focus in work. And what that leads to either that's a very good trait, being very obsessed with work, but nobody looks back and says, wow, I'm glad I billed 3,000 hours in a year. Nobody looks back on their deathbed and says, I'm glad I worked over the weekend and missed my kid's t-ball game, right? I don't have kids, but no gravestone says, I'm glad I worked and I'm glad I did that. And so what I really learned is that work as much as you can when you're young. That way, when I do get to the point where I have kids, I have time to step away, raise the kids, because I think that's the most important. I think kids need a mom and a dad to really teach them everything. And so I would say that
boom, we're canceled just for that one thing.
That's I think from the beginning of the show to the end, I'm getting more and more controversial. So
as it should be, because we want to
exactly our audience retention.
Yeah,
it
right.
Helps the YouTube algorithm.
You never know what he's going to say next. He might end up going completely off the rails here in a minute. Surprise even me.
I might talk about gun rights in a second. We might really get canceled.
Easy now. Wow, exactly. Media Matters is going to. Sorry.
So, Vox is not having a good day right now. But no, seriously. So my mom has always pretty much said, like, what if, and I'm not one of those people who goes, you burn the boats when you get there, because those people are either the most successful or they're alcoholics because they failed, but they didn't have a backup plan. And so going through college, I mean, I'm still currently in college. I was always like, okay, well, if I'm not successful in, if I'm not what I would consider successful by, the end of law school, right? I can always just go be a lawyer. I have a degree from, hopefully UGA if they let me in, which I don't think they should. I'm telling you, I'm not smart, but people keep telling me I am, right? It goes back to that imposter syndrome.
You wanted to get in politics because it's a place you felt like you could fit
exactly in. Exactly. I mean, I'm telling you, I have not met a senator or congressman that I would say you're a genius, because geniuses don't go into politics, and I'm not a genius. But getting back to it, I think that's gonna get clipped. Me saying I'm not a genius. But getting back to it,
I'll be the one to clip it.
I think the most important thing you can learn is connections, right? Because I mean, Grant Cardone said something where he said, I'm only going to pay for like 4 colleges, right? And it's like he's like, I'm only going to send them to wherever the Blackstones, the Gateses, the Buffetts, wherever they're going. And I think that's a big thing. I mean, I know, politics really is a meritocracy, but it's a meritocracy that is rhymed with nepotism as well. And so it's not a nepotism in terms of family, but it's in terms of who you know.
Yeah.
I mean, starting out in politics as somebody whose family has some political connections, but not, can't call the White House and schedule a meeting, but, we can call a county commissioner and get a meeting. So that's a little cool. Mm-hmm. But starting off in politics, not really knowing anybody and having a different last name than the bulk of my family, who are the connected part of my family. I have a different last name because, my mom is connected to the family, not my dad. Right. So I have my dad's last name. So that, I think really helped build relationships, because I think that's the most important thing. Imagine you're going to school and then 30 years later you turn on the TV. Oh, somebody you gave answers to in the 3rd grade math class is now, the president of the United States. Like, that's just something cool, and you
Yeah.
can, call in the favor for helping him with his multiplication tables.
Got a buddy
So
of
I
mine.
think that the most important thing really is building connections.
Yeah.
Because the more people if you break down at 2 a.m., you don't want to just be relying on one person. You want to have a handful of people you can call.
Yeah, no kidding. I got a buddy of mine that I played youth football with, went to the Under Armour Youth All-American game. He is one of the running backs for the Steelers now.
That's cool.
Jalen Samuels, man. Like,
Yeah.
and you never know where those types of connections are gonna take you, because eventually I hope to have him on this podcast
cool.
and everything like that. It's also helped tremendously with just getting conversation. One of our great episodes that we had is with Charles Billingsley, who's a big time Christian Christian music artist out of Lynchburg, Virginia. Friend of mine goes to his church, walked up to him, was like, "Hey, want to be on this podcast?" It's wild. It was actually one of the first podcasts we had video for too. But you never know when things like that are gonna pan out and play off. And I give all of that to give a segue into another story I want you to tell, and that is, like, you have a letter of recommendation from Clarence Thomas.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
So,
Please tell me it's a lot cooler than just a phone call being like, "Hey, can you write this to..."
So, growing up in the South, like you did as well, you make, everyone knows everyone, right? Especially, nowadays, yes. Unless you grow up in Atlanta, Charlotte, obviously you can't know everybody in Atlanta. So I have, an uncle, or a great uncle, I guess it would be, who grew up in Savannah, Georgia. And, I was talking to him the other day, or sorry, not the other day, a couple months ago. And we were talking. I hadn't really talked to him that much. He's a distant family member who I've met a few times and everything. And, we were talking, and, he was like, "Oh, any ideas what you want to do?" And I was like, "Oh, I want to go to law school, and I'd already had some letters of recommendation, because that's, a big thing really is if you're an average student, but you get a letter of recommendation from somebody cool, it might bump you up. Mm-hmm. And again, I have good grades, I have a good GPA, but at the same time, it's like I want to pad the stats as much as possible.
Right.
I want to guarantee. I don't want 92. I want 99% chance that I'm getting in.
Right.
And so we're talking and everything, and he goes, "Oh yeah, well, one of my friends I grew up with, he's a federal judge." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Yeah. He was like, "Well, if you'd want him to write you a letter of recommendation or whatever, just let me know. I mean, he owes me a few favors back in the day, and stuff like that." I was like, "Okay." And then I was talking to his son, I guess it was. That's another. I guess I get confused when it comes to family trees. Again, I'm not smart. UGA, if the dean of the UGA law is watching this, I'm not smart. You probably shouldn't let me in, but I hope you do. So I was talking to his son. So I guess that's my cousin still.
Yeah.
And everything. I was like, "Oh yeah, your dad was telling me that he knows this federal judge or whatever." And then he goes, "You know who it is, right?" And I go, "No, I didn't ask. I mean, there's so many federal judges. I mean, there's hundreds of them throughout the country."
Yeah, you're talking about a federal circuit judge.
Yeah, you're talking about appellate. We're talking about U.S. attorney. What are we talking about? And he goes, "Oh yeah, it's Clarence Thomas." I go, "What? It's who?" And then I was like, "You're kidding." And he goes, "No." And so technically the letter of recommendation has not been written.
Okay.
But it's there. And so I believe him. He's never lied to me before. And I mean, he probably did. He grew up in Savannah, and same place where Clarence Thomas grew up. And so I think if that can't get me into UGA law, I really don't deserve to go to UGA law. Because I hope that, because UGA law right now is named after somebody who didn't go to UGA law. It's named after Secretary of State under JFK and then LBJ, Dean Rusk, I believe it is. I hope in the future that unfortunately, when Clarence Thomas passes everything, I would like it to be named after Clarence Thomas, because even though he didn't go to UGA law, I still think that he's probably one of the best legal minds from this generation to come from Georgia, and I think his story is very uniquely American. It could only happen in America.
Yeah.
I mean, you come from I know all the it's really the white liberals, but all the liberals who like to push, systemic racism, go talk to Clarence Thomas, because he actually faced systemic racism.
Well, they pulled his documentary off of Amazon. The whole reason why Created Equal, which is Clarence Thomas's story through his eyes, the whole reason that documentary got pulled from Amazon was because it went against the narrative of critical race theory and all that stuff that was being done. And so that's how the Daily Wire was able to pick it up and buy it. And that's how they're able to distribute it now, is because Amazon was like, nah, we're not going to put it out in there. It goes against our narrative.
Yeah, it goes against the narrative.
So one of the things I want to talk with you about next is starting to transition into some culture talk here. And one of the things that happens in the culture when you have ambitious young people, specifically like 25 and under, is they are either lauded or they are criticized. Which one have you had more of? And then talk to me a little bit about the dynamic of both. What does that look like in your life so far?
I mean, well, obviously, if we're talking about people on the left, it's obviously criticism. I've had a guy, oh God, I had a guy tell me, some guy found my Facebook profile or like cover photo and was like, yeah, you're missing a button there or something. I was like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, what, how bad is your life that you went to my Facebook profile picture and found out that my button was unbuttoned or something, right? But I would say I've mostly been, received very well. I mean, I think the one thing about young conservatives is that it really welcomes older conservatives, because I think that, obviously it's not a guarantee, but I think that there's a lot of young conservatives throughout the country who are really ready to carry on the torch. Mm-hmm. And so I think that a lot of older conservatives get really happy when they see younger people that are ready to carry the torch and ready to do the brunt of the fight. Yeah, I know I already got a big head to start with, but I've definitely received, some letters and some emails and some DMs that are, hey, I think you're the future of the country. Hey, I think you're this, you're that. I don't want to be president. That's too much responsibility, but I appreciate everybody who wants me to be president. That's I think one of the biggest honors somebody can say. But I've received, a lot of people. I've received a lot of criticism because I don't always, agree with whatever the talking points are, I would say. I remember back in, I guess it was 2018 or 19 or maybe 17, I don't know. I remember Donald Trump, came out in favor of red flag laws, and I'm very conservative, very pro Second Amendment. I mean, you and I went through a little bit of my gun collection. Yep. And I remember saying like, hey, that's a bad idea. And I remember there were I lost like a couple hundred followers that day. Which obviously, I mean, if I think you either support someone or you don't. There's nobody you're going to 100% agree with besides pretty much yourself. So I've received a lot of criticism, and some of the criticism has been good, and I've grown from some of the things I've heard. Because I think that anybody who thinks they're right on everything is either trying to sell you something or is a fraud. And I know I'm not right on everything, and I'm sure my political opinions will change over the years again.
Ben Shapiro talks about how if you don't, anything you say before the age of like 25, it's just like scrap it from the history.
Yeah, just go ahead. No, you should be able to hit reset at 25. And
I'm not sure that I completely believe that or agree with it. Although there's some merit to it. However, I think
there's certain life experiences that I haven't lived.
Right.
That whenever something like that happens, you start to. Now the good thing for stuff for like that is people tend to become more conservative as they get older.
Well, I also think that the State of the Union changes.
That's true as well, and
the Overton window shifts.
Yeah, and exactly. I mean, science comes out. I mean,
proving, disproving.
30 years ago, 40 years ago. I mean, speaking on the issue of abortion again, getting a little bit more controversial as we go on and on. Speaking on the issue of abortion, I mean, I saw something. I don't know the rough numbers. I just read over it that in the 1970s, it was like 1975, like 2 years after Roe v. Wade was terribly decided. They took a poll, and most Americans believe that a baby wasn't viable until like 35 weeks or something like that out of like 40 weeks. And you look at it now, and babies are viable. I think I saw something about a baby at 17 weeks who survived outside the womb.
Yep.
And so as science changes, policy and what people believe change, and it's always important to keep in mind how people are raised. I mean, I'm sure, there are, I was talking to my grandmother about it because I was driving around Athens because, obviously I just, got, the office and everything here. I was driving around Athens, and I'm not sure if you came this way when you were driving in, but there's a big thing up at the front that I'll show you after this if you didn't. It says like it's been 60 years since UGA was integrated. You know how many people are older than the age of 60 in America? So I'm always one of the people who, obviously racism is terrible, and I'm not defending racism, but in terms of, you got to understand how people were raised, right? And how, if you're young, you're way more open to change than if you're older, right?
Right.
And so I think that as the Overton window shifts and everything, and certain stuff that was allowed to be said that's now not allowed to be said, just even in my lifetime. I mean, in my lifetime, both political parties didn't support gay marriage, and now pretty much got universal support from everyone.
Yeah.
President Trump was the first presidential candidate to have an LGBT4 thing against, and he also put in the first openly gay cabinet level officer, and that never would have happened under George Bush or Barack Obama. And I think that it's really some changes obviously are good and needed. I think everybody should be afforded the same abilities to succeed as everyone else, regardless of immutable characteristics, right? And then I think that some changes that we see really are bad for the country, like what's going on with critical race theory and what's going on with trying to teach Americans to hate America. And I think that there's a more sinister plot behind it, because I'm sure you've met Republicans and Democrats, and I think that you would agree that this part of the statement is not controversial, that people who love America, are both Republican and Democrats, but people who hate America, I think, are overwhelmingly left-wing.
Yep.
I think they're overwhelmingly left. There are right-wing people who think that America is turning into a bad country, but so I think that that's really, some changes aren't good, some changes are bad. I really honestly forgot the question that you even asked, but
no, man, I like it. Like, you're very good at when you get on a roll, taking something.
Yeah, no, if you ask the right question, I could talk for probably an hour and just roll it into everything and talk about everything.
Now, one of the things that you're talking a little bit about abortion there for a second. You're wearing a pin right now that has to do with that. Why don't you explain the pin a little bit?
So this pin was worn on the floor of the Georgia, I think it was the State House, as the Harpy bill was passed. I think for the second time. I think it had to pass 2 or 3 times for it to go through. But yeah, it was given to me actually by Joshua Edmonds, who's the president, chairman of the Georgia Life Alliance, which they do a lot of work for it. It was given to me. It was worn by a State House member on the floor, and I was in the rafters. I don't know what you call it. It's like where you watch the votes taking place.
Or whatever it is, yeah.
I was there when that bill passed, but this was worn by a State House member, obviously a Republican, when it passed. So I always thought that was cool. Some people collect challenge coins. Those are too heavy and bulky. So I like to collect lapels. So I have a congressional one. I have a Senate one. I have to pick up an Attorney General one from Chris Carr.
Now this one is just a set of small, I think it's glass-looking baby's feet.
I could be wrong, but this is a baby, the same size as a baby's feet at maybe it's 8 weeks or 10 weeks. I don't know. Joshua would know more about that. Where it is in the process, but yeah, it was pretty cool.
Wow.
And I like to keep it on, because one thing that my mom taught me when I was young is, she always said, this is probably a Southern thing, you probably heard something similar, is, don't start a fight, but you're not going to get in trouble when you come home if you're defending somebody else. And so I think that, I really, if I had to summarize what I really like to do, I really like to defend those who can't defend themselves, whether that's, a baby in the womb, somebody who either for some reason, can't articulate themselves. I've always tried to be a leader. Like right now, there's a whole process going on called Unmask Our Children in the state of Georgia, which is basically, trying to urge a couple of things, trying to urge school boards not to force it, and trying to urge some action out of the state government as well. And most people they work for somebody, they are shy, they can't go and speak at these school board meetings, because if they do, they would either be stuttering, they'd be so nervous. But I talk in front of people all the time. So I like to always try to, I'll take the arrows for the entire crew. And so I think that that's really the most vulnerable among us, are those whose lives determine on whether or not their parents, want them to come to full term.
Yep. So a lot of the things that we've been talking about are very faith-based, and we actually have a show through Forerunner Productions that leans heavily into our faith. It's called The Shelter Hole, and it's hosted by my father, Big John G. He is really awesome at taking scripture and making it applicable to our lives by sharing a lot of his own experiences. So if you want to get a little bit more Jesus time in your life, if you want to hear some great conversations that always come back to our faith in ways that our faith is both being challenged and ways that we can always better ourselves in the culture around our faith, make sure you go check out The Shelter Hole on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. It's an absolutely phenomenal show. You've encountered a few lawsuits.
I have.
At this point. At 20 years old, you've already encountered a few lawsuits with some of these business ventures. What can you tell me about some of these suits? Well, like, walk me through the story of some of these things.
So my podcast is called Let Freedom Ring, right? And when I was 16, 17 years old, I didn't think about trademarks, patent. Well, I always get confused. Trademarks, patents, everything like that, right? Mm-hmm. And I did the podcast for off and on for 2-3 years at this point, probably going on 3 years at this point. I think it was 2018, so we're 2021, so something like that. And for the most part, people really didn't say anything. Like, oh, Let Freedom Ring, this, that, the other. And then, it started to grow, and I did not think it would grow. I was just doing it because I liked getting my opinion out. And really, the reason I started the podcast, which I think is funny, is because, I think most people who listen to my show probably are the ones in the family. But I think most people have like one person they look to for certain things. Like I don't know if you're related or know a mechanic at all. But if you hear a weird noise or something, who are you going to call? You're going to call the mechanic, right? And so everyone, I don't think there's anybody I'm friends with or related to who don't know that, I know a little bit about politics, at least something, right? And so I'm the one typically people called. And so I was like tired of, having to say the same thing to the same people, 10 times a day, 10 times a week, right? And so I started the podcast as a way to really just kind of get everything down. And so someone was like, hey, no, I see that, for instance, one of the first ones I did was about the National Interstate Compact Act, right? And because states have 100% say over how they do their elections, at least they're supposed to. And now if SB 1 passes, then we'll have some problems. But so what that means is, most states, I think 48 states, winner take all. You get 51%. In Georgia, you get all 16 votes. I think with the exception of Nebraska and Maine, it's like that. And then Nebraska, it goes on. The winner of the state gets the 2 senatorial votes. And then, because, how it works. I mean, every state gets at least 3 electoral votes. It's the direct number of their congressional representation. So your 2 senators and however many congressmen you have. If it's California, you got like 55. And if it's Montana, you only have 1. And so one of the first ones I did, because this was kind of a big idea back then, was a lot of states agreed to just send their electoral votes to whoever won the national popular vote, which is something that I was completely against. And so I remember I recorded a podcast about that. It was actually one of the best podcasts in terms of numbers that early on, right? And like every other one was at like, I think like 15 listeners, and this one jumped up to like 80, 90 listeners. I was like, whoa, yeah, starting to make it. And now if I get an episode that has 90 listens, I'm like, what did I say? What did I do?
Or what didn't I say?
Yeah,
why was I boring?
Actually, then the question becomes, why did nobody even listen to it for 30 seconds or however long it takes for it to get it? And that's why, I keep getting more and more controversial, so you stay around. See, that's why the best people to interview are those people who understand shows and audience retention. If I give you everything good in 30 seconds,
why are you going to go?
Exactly.
You ain't going to go.
And so getting back into it's stuff like that. So I had a couple of people who were like, hey, I saw this thing on Fox News this morning that the Democrats are trying to get a national popular vote. And I was like, oh, I actually just recorded a podcast about this. Here you go. And obviously it's morphed as time. But what happened is, as it grew, people reached out to me about doing sponsorship, stuff like that. And I've done some over the years, done some, not done some, because I don't want to tell you to buy something that I wouldn't buy myself.
Right.
Like you drink this coffee.
Absolutely. I
do. And so you're not going to tell somebody to go buy a bad cup of coffee because it looks bad on you. Because I consider many of my listeners, longtime listeners, family. I mean, I talk to some of them all the time. I have a phone call with this guy in Iowa who's a disabled veteran. We talk probably at least once a month, just at random. This is somebody who just followed me on Twitter one day, and now he's probably one of my biggest supporters. And I also, a little backtrack, I never believed it when people were like, oh, I love my fans, you guys are like family. I was like, shut up, okay? Taylor Swift, shut up. What are you talking about? But then, and I'm, again, nowhere near Taylor Swift. You don't actually care about any of these people. Yeah, that's what I always thought. And I'm sure for some people that's the truth. But at least for me, because, I've always been very extroverted, love talking to people. And if my mom knew that I was like 16 years old, giving my number out to random people on the internet, like, yeah, give me a call, she'd probably have taken my phone away. But yeah, I mean, and so what happened was, I grew, the company grew and everything, or the podcast grew and everything. And then I guess there was some show by some radio network in New York that hadn't even been on air since the 90s, but I guess whatever it was, trademarks or whatever, lasts for like 100 years or I don't know. Again, UGA Law, if you're listening, you probably shouldn't let me in. But anyway, so
or maybe do let him in because he has more practical experience than any of your other students at this point. I don't know.
But anyway, so I'll give you the rundown. The most lawsuit, 99.9% of civil lawsuits, they'll send a cease and desist, and then you'll negotiate and you'll work it out. And typically, they just want money, right? Nobody wants to go to law. Nobody wants to go to court. They just want to, either give you money or take money away because your lawsuits are not good. They take time and whatever. So yeah, one day I don't know how they got my address. Got a certified cease and desist. Quit using Let Freedom Ring. Actually, what saved me in that lawsuit, I'm not even sure if I'm allowed to tell you this, is that the podcast's technical title was Let Freedom Ring, hosted by Noah Ring.
Yeah.
So that saved me probably a lot of money. And then, I've been sued some other times about other sort of copyright infringement type things. I guess it's copyright. Again, I have no idea the difference. I couldn't tell you the difference between, I know patents are inventions. I couldn't tell you the difference between copyright and trademarks to save my life.
Sounds like you need a producer, man.
Yeah, sounds like I need a producer. Hopefully I can find one soon. You know any good producers?
I know one or two, yeah.
We'll talk about it after the show.
We'll have to talk about it.
That's going to drop audience retention if if we talk about producing.
Yeah, we can't. Yeah,
they can't talk about it. We'll talk about it later.
We'll talk about it later.
But yeah, so I've had my lawyer's been practicing law for a while. He went to UGA Law, and everything. So he reached out to me a couple of years ago, and he was like, hey, if you ever need if something ever crazy happens, if you ever need my services or whatever, just let me know. We'll work it out. Within whatever, right? And now it's at the point where now I have them look over contracts. I know something about lawyers looking over contracts, and just random things. I had COVID a couple of weeks ago, and I thought I was gonna die because I'm very dramatic. As most men are when he gets sick. I get a cold, I'm gonna die. So I had him draft a new will and everything, and obviously I'm alive and I'm kicking. I'm not kidding. I called him. I called him at like 3 in the afternoon.
20 years old.
No, yeah, I called him at like 3 in the afternoon. And I was like, dude, I'm not gonna make it, man. I got 101-degree fever. I'm not gonna make it. I'm gonna email you over. Can you just make it legally binding? So what
20-year-old has a will?
I have a will. Listen, there's a long, I've had to deal with probates and stuff like that. And, I just want more probate. I just want everything to go the way it's supposed to go. I guess, honestly, if I die, it doesn't matter. But I had a will beforehand. I left my car to somebody. And
man, I'm glad I ain't got nothing to give away right now. My family would be screwed.
Yeah, well, they could liquidate my companies and probably make it okay. But I started planning my funeral, and I asked him. I said,
"Oh gosh,
listen," I said, "Hey, will you?" I want my funeral would be a campaign rally. I'm not even kidding.
Oh my gosh,
I had it set to where if I did pass away, he'd invite Governor Brian Kemp to come speak, Donald Trump Jr. It'd be a campaign rally. If my life has been consumed by politics. It's only right if my eulogy is given by the governor of the state of Georgia, my favorite state in the country. All right, I asked him if he would ask Sonny Perdue to come say a few words, and David Perdue. I'm not kidding. This is the truth. And then obviously, a couple of days later.
The sad part is that I 100% believe you.
The sad part is it's 100% true, and I could probably pull my will up online. But no, but now obviously a few days later, and some Gatorade later, and now we're fine. Probably should have went to outside of Jacksonville, Florida, and got some hydrochloroquine and just looked like Hunter Biden and just shot it up. But I would have been fine. But no.
Oh, man.
But yeah, no. So what I would tell most people, if you're listening to this and you want to get into media or you want to whatever, well, one, I mean, I would say don't get into political media because that's the worst type of media. And nobody gets mad at sports. I should have went to sports media. Nobody gets mad at people covering the NFL draft, but I had to choose the one that makes people upset.
Let's be honest here. Which one's more fun?
I don't know though. I'd love to interview Tom Brady. I have so many questions I want to ask that man.
Oh, man.
I might be able to ask him after he's done with football because he seems very conservative to me. But no, I mean,
get Tebow.
I think I could get Tebow.
You could get Tebow.
I got some connections to Tebow too.
You got some connections?
Yeah,
to Tebow?
I got some connections.
We'll have to talk offline.
But anyway, no, because he's from Nice, which is in Jacksonville, which is right down the road from an hour away from where I grew up.
Yep.
But yeah, I would say don't worry about lawsuits. If you want to do something, do it.
Yeah. And
9 times out of 10, the people, lawsuits never end up anywhere. And then always just find you a good UGA law graduate. They'll get you out of the lawsuits. Is what I learned. In our retainer agreement, I don't even know what you call it. There's like a bonus for every time he gets me out of a lawsuit.
Nice.
So he's very incentivized to not have a lawsuit.
So with this career in politics, where do you want to take that? What is your dream ultimatum with your career in politics?
So that's a very good question. Something that has changed.
Immediately goes into the politician answer.
It's a very good question. First off, I want to thank you for what you're doing. Okay, you're doing a great job.
There it is.
In media like this.
This is it. This is it.
No, I don't know, and that's the thing is I don't know, right? Because I love explaining things, and what made Rush Limbaugh great is that he could look at a 2,000-page bill and understand it and be able to tell you as you're driving to your job as a carpenter
and make it funny.
And make it funny with one hand tied behind his back with talent on loan from God.
That man, so a lot of people don't know this. Like Rush got his start as a comedian.
Yeah.
He was doing stand-up conservative
Not as funny
comedy.
as me, but yeah. I told you that joke beforehand. It was a good joke.
That's a good joke.
Maybe we'll tell it. Maybe that'll go on locals.com.
Yeah. Okay, we'll have to mark that one down.
Yeah.
I need you to tell that. I need you to tell that joke.
I will.
If you want to hear Noah tell this joke, I'll give you a hint. It deals with Stacey Abrams. If you want to hear Noah tell a joke about Stacey Abrams, you got to go be a supporter at locals.com. So go to www.forerunnerproductions.locals.com and become a subscriber today. All right, keep going.
It's a great joke. Let's just start there. But
it's gonna get us kicked off the internet.
Where were we at? I forgot where we were at. Oh,
where are you trying to take this thing?
I've had that thought, from time to time, and I was like, I think every kid wants to be president, and anybody who wants to be president hasn't spent enough time in the media to realize you can't do anything right if you're president.
You could not pay me.
You're always going to make a little over half the country mad at anything, right? Because nobody agrees on anything. You could not pay me enough to be president; it wouldn't be worth it. I'd love to be vice president. That's a cool job. Let me be vice president. Go shake hands. Give me a microphone. Let me still do the podcast. Be a great job. I don't know. See, I think that. I don't know what the future of media is. I think the future of media is more stuff like this instead of Fox News or whatever, right? I think it's independent stuff like this, because I think that, your agenda or whatever your agenda is, right? Because everybody has an agenda. Everybody wants to push something through, right? Like the show you were talking about in the shelter hole. I mean, that's obviously to grow discipleship. Mm-hmm. Everyone has an agenda. Anybody who tells you they don't have an agenda are wrong. It might be a good agenda. Might be, the agenda might be to better humanity, but everybody has an agenda. I
have the same argument with propaganda, right? The word propaganda leaves a bad taste in our mouth because it's been used for so much bad. However, I'm not against propaganda as long as the propaganda is good, right? Like if it is moral, if it is ethical, if it is something that you can actually build a society on. The Federalist Papers started as propaganda. It was 100% propaganda to get the city of New York, mostly the state of New York, but most of the city of New York, on board with the Constitution rather than it being rather than the Articles of Confederation. A lot of people forget about that.
Yeah,
it's good propaganda.
Yeah, and propaganda is not necessarily always bad.
Right,
but 9 times out of 10 it is. Whenever it's from the Chinese Communist Party
because it's so easy to be weaponized for the wrong purposes.
Exactly, but I enjoy I would like to say, in the future I'd love to have a 6 to 9. I'd love to have the 12 to 3 hour on radio, and I'd love to, do this, that, the other, right? But I don't know what the future is. I think the future is not radio. I think it's podcasting, because this is, to people who are only listening to the audio, this is basically a radio show on demand.
And I think
the future's on demand.
And I think that anyone that is old school that likes the radio feel, I think that what syndicated radio stations are going to be doing is they're going to start signing
syndicating
deals.
podcasts.
They're going to start syndicating podcasts. They're going to get the
recorded.
Have
podcast networks and stuff like that.
Whatever, whether it's a live stream of a podcast or whether they are on demanding the podcast to fill their blocks of time, they're going to have deals with podcast hosts. They're going to get the audio for the podcast, and they're just going to run the podcast on their.
I mean, think about it. That's the first hour of Ben Shapiro's radio show, which is one of the biggest, at least conservative radio shows in the country.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say it's probably somewhere like that. Obviously, traveling and speaking. I love speaking. I love speaking because it gets me out of my studio, obviously, and I get to go meet people because I've met some very interesting people.
Extroverts unite.
Oh yeah, dude. Well, I've met some interesting people. There's a kid who travels around Georgia. His name's Cooper Guyon. He's a good friend of mine. He travels around. He speaks a lot. He wrote a book when he was 15 years old called like a 15-year-old's case to save America or something like that. It's a great book. But anyway, so there was this one guy who came up to me. I told Cooper this morning. He laughed. He came up to me and he said, "Yeah, you're not quite as good of a speaker as Cooper Guyon, but you're almost there," or something like that. And I told Cooper that this morning. He laughed so hard. I was just like,
"You ain't the best.
It's like,
you sick?
You're pretty good. You're pretty good." I was like, "Really?"
That is the deep south, southern Georgia.
You obviously didn't hear the joke I told, but okay, Cooper would never say that. But anyway, you meet people, and you get to meet Americans.
Mm-hmm.
You get to meet true Americans. I mean, my family, my grandfather, when he was growing up, split time between Delaware and West Virginia. Well, West Virginia, right on the line. And I remember they, had a house in Virginia, Southwest, Virginia, not Southwest Virginia, Southwest, Virginia. They'll get mad if you get that mixed up. So people in
our whole family is
people
from
in
West
Southeast West Virginia don't want to hear anything about Southwest Virginia. Trust me. But anyway,
so my whole family.
You understand.
Is from West Virginia.
I'm like, you guys are
my
literally
dad
the
spent
same.
time in the coal mines, like.
So you'll understand where this is going.
Yeah.
Because I remember as a kid, one summer, I don't know how it was, but one summer I went to go visit my grandparents, and there was it was Pocahontas, Virginia. It's right outside. It's like the town right outside, because there's not really towns in rural Virginia. It's just, everything kind of just goes together. It's counties, exactly.
Yeah, everything runs as a county.
Yeah, everything's pretty much just a county thing. And so I remember one summer, because I went to school in Florida at the time, I guess, and we we got out before they did. And so I remember I was up there and we were driving to town one day, because there's towns. You have to drive to town. You know what I'm talking about.
You actually if you are going to a town, you gotta
go to town.
You gotta go to town.
If you want to go get anything, right? And so I remember one year there was, probably 100 kids just walking into different classes, because there was an outdoor type of campus. And then I remember the next summer, we something similar happened. I remember going, it had been a couple of days or whatever. I remember going, where are the kids? And the school had shut down because there wasn't the coal. What I know now, the coal mines had started shutting down in town because of regulations and policies, and so there wasn't enough money or people to keep the school open. So these people who already have it so much worse off than 95% of the country, because if you have to travel 45 minutes to town, and you live in a very rural, very poor part of Virginia anyway, that's a barrier. That's a big barrier. And now these kids, instead of being able to go to town or go to high school in their hometown, now had to drive 30, 45 minutes to the other more, I guess, developed part of the rural counties to go to school. And I remember, thinking back on it like a couple months ago or a year ago or so, and I remember thinking wow, what happened politically? What policies led to small towns in America dying? Because they are dying. And I think it'll be, if small towns die, I think it'll be the end of the country as we know it. Because I think I would much rather live in small town America than New York City or LA.
One of the things that I've recognized by being in business is that everybody thinks that you go to the big city to make it in business. They think that the big city is where all the money's at when it comes to business. You want to go find an investment, you better go to the big city. You want to make some money, you want to start your business, you better find a city where you got some customers and stuff like that. The city is where the business is done, but all the money is in the boonies.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody that makes the money in the city doesn't want to live around a bunch of people. They want their privacy. They want their land. They want to have their toys. And they want to be away or they want to be living in the penthouse suite that you can't get to.
Exactly.
And the people that are living in that penthouse suite are either going to take advantage of you or they're not going to give you their cash. So if you're trying to get into business, you best go look for your money somewhere else besides the city. Because you ain't going to find it where you think you're going to find it.
No, you're right. One of the wealthiest people I've met, this guy is worth, I don't even know how many figures. A lot of figures. He lives in... I'll put it like this, right? If you saw him in public, you would just be like, oh, it's just another retiree. But this guy owns some of the biggest brands in the world. And he's the most stand-up guy I've ever met. Actually, I remember we sat down. You know, I've always been taught to, like, you know, if you're going out to eat with somebody or whatever, you pay. You know, so if I invited you out to eat, it's customary for me to pay. It's always what I've been taught. And so we were sitting down or whatever. And it's a very nice restaurant. We were talking and everything, you know. And, you know, at the end of it, I was like, oh, you know, I'll pay. And keep in mind, this is a very nice restaurant, you know, where you're getting $30, $40, $50 steaks. And he goes, what do you mean you're going to pay? And I was like, I'm going to pay. And he goes, I own the restaurant. And I remember, I was like, what? Like, I knew this guy was well off. You know, in the South, you know who's well off and you know who's not. Even though it's a little hard to tell because they drive the 20-year-old.
Pull a Bruce Wayne on you, man.
Yeah, he was like,
we're going to put a couple tables together. I'm not sure you can do that. Oh, of course I can. I own the place.
I own the company. And it's just like...
Let the ballerinas go swimming in
exactly.
the little...
And I remember thinking, I had no idea. And I'll tell you a good story about a good friend of mine named Daniel Merritt. He's co-founder of Nine Line. He sold his half of Nine Line to his brother. He ran for Congress a while back, and so we were trying to have some sort of meet and greet / fundraiser / thing for him, and I was trying to help plan because it was in my county because he was running to represent my district, and my buddy Rob gave him a call and he goes, hey Danny, we're trying to grab beer. I mean, this guy running for the Republican nomination in South Georgia. I mean, it's not Washington D.C. You drink a beer. Yeah. And
even in Washington D.C. they drink a beer.
Yeah, I hope so. I hate Washington D.C. But anyway,
I've been to D.C. enough times at this point.
I've been to D.C. enough times that I've seen everything you'd want to see in D.C. and
some things that you don't want to see.
It's a lot of things you don't want to see. But anyway, I remember he goes, hey, what kind of beer you want? You want whatever. And he goes, oh, my favorite type of beer is free beer. This guy's worth a lot of money. This guy had just sold half of his company, and Nine Line Apparel, for those of you who listen, is not a small company. Okay, this isn't something run out of a basement. They own the sole rights to franchise Black Rifle. They own a lot. And he goes, yeah, my favorite beer is free beer. We could have went and got him a $5 case of 30 pack of beer, not good beer, and he would have been happy with it. Now I think that also relates to his time in the military. And you spend 2 years in Afghanistan. Any type of beer in America probably tastes better than the water you were having in Afghanistan.
My brother been deployed 3 times as a 14-year special ops vet. He'll take a case of Coors over just about anything else, man.
Yeah, no, I mean, and it's also you've been in the very worst situations almost a person could be, right? That everything tasted good, right?
The simple things in life mean more.
I was talking to I think he was a Navy SEAL, and we were talking. I was like, so after BUDS, after all of this terrible training for a year and a half, because they don't feed you amazing. You're not having filet mignon every night in BUDS. I was like, what was your first meal when you got home or whatever? He's like, dude, I stopped at McDonald's, and I thought I was at the Trump Hotel eating dinner, because it was stuff that actually has a little bit of flavor to it versus MREs or whatever it is.
The funny thing is that your last week in BUDS, they have for one of their graduation things, they always have a giant pizza party for all of them. So they go through
probably
Hell Week. It's the end of Hell Week.
I've heard about this.
And they have a giant pizza party for these guys. So I want to talk to you about 2 last things, and we're going to get some deep dive into culture. Before I talk about the culture fight, I want to talk about one of our other interview-based shows, and that is Let's Talk Fortitude. Let's Talk Fortitude is also hosted by Big John G, and it is all about telling the stories of successful entrepreneurs. We take a special pride in interviewing veteran entrepreneurs. There's all sorts of great information over there, as well as one of our entrepreneurs is an active duty Navy guy who owns his own restaurant while being active duty, and was born in Havana. So if you want to hear his take on the Cuban crisis and what it's like to own a business while also being active duty, make sure you go over to Let's Talk Fortitude and check out that episode and every other episode that's going to be dropping soon. It is really something to witness. There's a lot of things wrong with our culture today.
I agree.
And I want
a story. That's what
Great story. Thank you, everybody. No, I want you to tell me which one sticks out to you as the biggest piece of cancer in our culture. And then the second half of this question is, I need you to tell me how your career, specifically this political career and your show with Let Freedom Ring, how is that going to help solve the problem?
Okay.
So step one, what is the cancer? What is the biggest part of cancer in our culture today?
Well, I think that's a very, very hard question to answer, right? Because a lot of the problems tie into each other, right? I mean,
right. Nothing exists in a vacuum.
Yeah, it'd be great if all these problems existed in a vacuum. You just blow the vacuum out.
Yeah, well,
right.
Yeah. Just check the list.
I would say probably. I think it's two parts. I think multiple angles are to blame, right? I think it's the corporate 24/7 news media as well as a lack of critical thinking. And I think that ties into each other with it's like people who take stuff at face value. Oh, this is CNN. Oh, this is even really Fox News. We have to believe it 100%, right? Oh, because when they grew up, at least Walter Cronkite acted like he was fair and unbiased, even though, like I said earlier, everyone has an agenda. And so I think that the biggest problem really is critical thinking, right? And just lack of intelligence. I don't know anybody who can look at what China's doing to our country and say, oh, that's fine. It's okay. I mean, they are gaining every day more and more influence and more action over America. I mean, I'm not sure if you're familiar with what happened a couple of weeks ago or months ago at this point, I guess, where John Cena apologized in Mandarin for saying Taiwan, I think it is a country.
Yeah.
And I mean, Taiwan is recognized by dozens of countries, and if a Republican's elected, it's recognized by the U.S. Because at least, I should say, if Donald Trump's elected, if Donald Trump or someone like Donald Trump's in office, it's recognized by the U.S. Because he's not afraid. And I think that the lack of critical thinking and looking at it and be like, oh, okay, it's all right. Yeah, it's fine that China, is stealing American ideas and making billions of dollars off of them. Because people who think critically and don't just take things at face value will look at it and, then they'll realize, okay, China's not like America. It's a one-party state. Okay, let's look at this party. Oh, the party that controls the Chinese government is called the Chinese Communist Party. Oh, okay, so they're probably communists. I mean,
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure.
I'm like something.
They could be conservative, but they're probably communists. It's a good guess.
Something about it, man, just gives me this vibe of commie. I couldn't be.
And that's why when people look at certain companies like AliExpress, Alibaba, stuff like that, you and I, if you hear a company, based out of Raleigh, North Carolina, you're like, oh, okay, you look at American companies with a certain thing. The problem is we relate those to Chinese companies. When these Chinese companies, again, are owned by what many would consider to be communism, the Chinese Communist Party, who, are currently detaining millions of Muslim Uyghurs in China, which I think is a big problem. But I think
full-on genocide. It's not just detention.
They're sterilizing the women.
Sterilization of the women.
They're killing people who don't convert to the religion of lack of religion of China. Who don't can convert to believing that the CCP
and nobody has a death toll on them right now because it's believed that they're burning the corpses.
Exactly, and getting back to, I think also a big problem is that America really is only driven by money. The country used to be driven, obviously money is good. We like money. That's why you and I have started businesses. But there's also a certain amount of decency, right? Like if you owned a restaurant and you walked outside and you saw a homeless man, I'm sure you'd be like, hey, come get a plate. You want to come wash dishes, make some extra money, whatever, right? You try to find a way to help, and I think that's how most Americans are. China's not like that. If you don't agree with Xi Jinping or whatever the CCP puts out, we won't hear from you anymore. They make their own billionaires, but the billionaire founder of, I think it was Alibaba, he hasn't been heard from in year and a half, 2 years, because he said something bad about the Chinese Communist Party. And a lot of people say, oh, he's on vacation. Well, I don't know who goes on a 2-year vacation, but the guy's probably either in a detention camp or he's dead. And so I think the problem is lack of critical thinking, because people will accept what Jake Tapper or Anderson Cooper says and just look at it and say, okay, that's got to be true, instead of really looking at the problems in America, right? We have a lot of issues that we need to solve. Whether it comes to immigration, whether it comes to, abortion. I think we need to have serious discussions about a lot of things. And the problem is most people don't realize it because they look at this great divide that they tell us is there, and I don't see it. Because driving through rural West Virginia, driving through, which is very conservative, went overwhelmingly, I think West Virginia went like plus 40 for Trump, right? And then driving through poor parts of blue states, I see the same problems, and I see people who get along. I mean, I live in a county that's, it's slightly conservative, but it's still, there's a good amount of Democrats there. And talking to people, the guy who cut my hair, he's a Democrat, and we were talking, and I was like, I don't see that big divide. But it's because that the media has told us that divide's there, and because politicians tell us every 4 years that this is the most important election in our lifetime. We heard that in November, we heard that in January with the runoffs, and we'll hear it in 2022, I'm sure, and we'll probably hear it in 2024, and we'll probably hear it every year thereafter. And I think that it's not true. And the big problem in America happened in the 1960s. You had conservative and liberal Republicans and Democrats. Now you just have Republicans and Democrats who are either liberal or conservative, right? And so there's no overlap on ideas. And so I think that what I try to do on my show is, one, I don't consider myself a journalist. I consider myself a commentator, because I'm not necessarily, going to sit up there and be like, well, on the 6 o'clock hour today, we'll be speaking about how a helicopter crashed. I don't talk about that. I don't talk about, President Biden came out today and unveiled his plan. I like to talk about what I believe in terms of what's going on and relating that to, to culture, to politics. Because the problem is most people just generally do not understand, government in a way that, and rightfully so.
That's one of the biggest complaints I hear all the time from so many people is like, I'm not into politics because it's too confusing. I'm not into politics because it's I don't know who to trust, right? Exactly.
And rightfully so.
Yeah.
No, rightfully so. I mean,
it takes a lot of effort and a lot of time to understand these things.
Exactly. And people are like, if everyone took a civics class, I'm like, well, here, newsflash, most high schools require civics.
Yeah.
99% of high schools. That's not the problem. The problem is civics is the idea of how our government's supposed to work, not how our government actually truly fully works. And I think that what I really try to do with my show is relate it to a common man. I mean, I didn't come from billionaires. It'd be great if I did, but I didn't. And so I know, I mean, I watched firsthand as the Great Recession, caused the mill in my county to close. And, at the time you don't realize what's happening, but you realize, later on looking back at it, if you think critically about it, what's going on. And then you start to look at what caused that, what caused this to happen? What caused the Great Recession? It's politicians being greedy. And the problem with people not paying attention is they can get away with a lot. Mm-hmm. And so what I really try to do on my podcast is, because I'm a nerd sometimes, and I like to, I like things that I like, and I like to look at why people do stuff and how they do it. And I really try to relate that with how somebody who, I try to act like whoever's listening, the only thing they're going to hear in politics is me. And so I try to take it, and they're only going to hear it for an hour a week, right? Let's say an hour a week. So I try to, how can I summarize a week's worth of stuff down? And I realize that you can find any podcast that'll just tell you what happened. But being able to relate it into a larger thing, like I spoke about earlier with critical race theory and how it's
Take me down the road of critical thinking.
Exactly. Take you down the road.
How are we going to critically think about this?
To take it from what takes me 10, 15 hours to understand, to piece things together and whatever, bump that down to 45 minutes to an hour every week. And you talk about, and then you have to do it in a way that the average person, who maybe didn't go to high school and maybe didn't go to college, how they can understand it. Mm-hmm. And that's why the Congress writes things like, because the problem is we send too many lawyers to Congress. Mm-hmm. But I mean, you and I just maybe looked at some legal documents and everything. And so, I was getting your perspective on it. And some of the words are like, what does this mean?
Yeah.
And so being able to really take it from a contract to taking it to a conversation.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good summary that I just came up with. I'm going to have to write down, but I guess we have it on recording now. So I'd say that's really what I'm trying to do, is and also to push freedom to my generation. A big thing I'm trying to do is trying to be the middleman between the older generation and the younger generation. Because I think a 19-year-old's view on conservatism is not the same as a 69-year-old's view on conservatism because of the different life experiences.
Yeah. Brother, you ready to get into a lightning round?
Let's get into a lightning round.
Let's get into a lightning round.
And then I got to tell the joke for
but that'll be on Locals.
Forerunner.locals.com.
Yeah, Forerunner Productions.
Forerunnerproductions.locals.com.
He's getting it down. All right. So the way that the lightning round works, 1, 2 word, maybe 3 word topics. You got to tell me the first thing that comes to mind, as fast as you can do.
The first phrase.
Yeah,
a lot of people
phrase.
A lot of people like first word. I'm like, well,
no, it can be a phrase. You can give me a paragraph
like
if you really need to.
If you ever talked to me, I don't really think in one word things. It's more contrast.
All right, here we go.
I'm a dumb man's Kanye West.
But you still need to try and keep it short. That's the thing.
I'll try to keep it short.
Keep doing the brevity.
I'll try to keep it short.
All right, you ready?
Yeah.
School.
Overrated.
South Georgia tuxedo.
My favorite outfit. I'm wearing a South Georgia tuxedo. The South Georgia tuxedo is a nice shirt, preferably UGA, not UF, or I won't like you. A suit jacket, jeans, pair of nice shoes.
Corruption.
Both parties are guilty of that.
Trump.
Probably the best president in the last 150 years.
COVID.
I don't want to say a plandemic, but definitely was blown out of proportion in order to institute what I think are a lot of draconian measures.
Coffee.
My favorite thing every morning.
You and me both. Hollywood.
Only if it is
Pale Horse.
Pale Horse.
Pale Horse coffee. Make sure you use promo code Forerunner at checkout. Get 10% off your order. It's really good coffee, guys. Hollywood.
Overrated and dying, which is probably the best thing for America, is that it's dying. It's actually moving to my home state of Georgia for the most part. Most things are being filmed here.
Trying to. Forerunner.
A lot of good things planned.
Yep. Speaking of Forerunner, and this is what we sort of alluded to before, how would you like for Forerunner to produce Let Freedom Ring, man?
Acting like we didn't just sign the contracts. I think I've been watching what you guys have been doing. I've known you, what you DM'd me a couple of months ago. I've been watching up, anytime I can be with John Garrett, I think is probably the best. He's the best. I had a chance to talk to him earlier. I'm looking forward to what we talked about earlier, and being able to bring you guys more content on locals.com, which will be coming very shortly, within the month, I would say. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
So you heard it here. Noah Ring and Let Freedom Ring podcast is coming to Forerunner Productions as one of our shows.
Hey, for legal things, Let Freedom Ring podcast
hosted by Noah Ring. Let Freedom Ring
purposes.
hosted by Noah Ring is coming to Forerunner Productions, and we are about to talk about what that's going to look like, all of the things that we have planned. He's going to tell a joke about Stacey Abrams, and it's all going to happen over on locals.com. So you got to make sure you go over to forerunnerproductions.locals.com and become a supporter so that you can get access to all the bonus content. Other than that, Noah, thanks for being here, man.
Glad to be on.
So glad that we got a chance to do this.
Get your Pale Horse coffee. Promo code Forerunner.
I've been looking forward to doing this for so long. So this is a really, really awesome conversation. I really appreciate it.
I agree. I think we'll probably be doing it again.
Yeah, very soon. See you guys in the next one.